What's up, Ron? How you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Pretty good. Sitting here with Ron Early. I want to share a few things. I want to share a bit about you and what you're building, but also what you've built, and a bit about your backstory. I really, when we first met, love the fact that you have 3 kids like I do, and
Yeah.
you're an entrepreneur, right? And you're
Yes.
growth minded, and part of this, I want to share some of your tips for success. I know you're an author. You are the sales god, as I've seen, right? You don't just get that title by doing nothing, right?
That's
So,
true.
want to share a bit about what it takes to build businesses, and uh, also be a good dad, right? And all those things that go along with it. So, give us a little bit of your backstory. How do we come to the current version of yourself we have sitting here?
So really long story, but we can find a way to make everything short form, right?
Yeah.
Uh I think like anybody else, when you find a calling, maybe sometimes you're not actually looking for it. I think that when you're looking for the thing, you're the furthest away from it. And I had moved from Florida to California, and I was going to Pasadena Community College, and I was working my way into going to UCLA, and I was going to go for exercise science. And the idea was to get a degree and then get into the fitness industry. I ended up getting a job offer back in Florida, so I dropped out the very first quarter that I was actually involved in school. And I went from being a personal trainer, explaining to my parents that I was dropping out of school, which they hated.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I got there, the director, which is the only thing you actually needed a degree for, and those are the people that give like the assessments to hire on clientele, got fired. So I just quit school, moved back across the country, had this job, and now I had no way to get clients. So the only thing that I could do is sell on the floor. So it was like a floor pulling thing. We were
Yeah.
one of 8 clubs at, UFit health clubs.
Oh
You
yeah.
remember UFit?
Yep.
There was a big hype
I
around
remember
that
that.
gym.
I've been there.
Looked like a big McDonald's.
Yeah.
Um, and it just happened by accident, it's through good communication, I guess, and creating relationships. I built a good clientele, a steady book, but we were one of 8 clubs in that district, and we are the only one without a director, but had the highest club sales.
Mm.
So indirectly, I drew a bunch of attention to myself, and in the whole entire, the industry, that company itself, they created a position called a DIT, which is where you no longer need a degree. You could just go through a director in training, a little call it like a pivot, and, I guess they train you through the way that you'd be able to now acquire this position, and after, like, 2 years, I was running the state of Florida, and that was
It's
yeah.
pretty sweet.
Yeah.
What do you think it was about the way you built your book that was so unique? What sort of led to that result?
I think falling into the psychology aspect, communication, body language, tonality, the way I guess fundamentally you could break down charisma, which I feel like is a core trait to sell anybody.
Sure.
Like, the energy that you have, the passion behind what you put behind what you say, ultimately will give off a good energy for anybody to wanna convert to anything that you have to pitch or sell, you know?
Sure.
They're gonna feel that before they hear anything that you have to even
Yeah.
communicate. And I think that in creating the book, I wanted to try to do the one thing that a lot of people have a hard time communicating, and that's fundamentally teaching what charisma is and how to apply those traits, how to acquire more of it, and how to embody it, and even more than that, practicing it until you can make it perfect. And that's what I think makes that book stand out from other sales books
That book's available everywhere.
everywhere.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Um, Very cool. So from there, what was the next step for you?
That was a tough one. God's definitely challenged me a lot through my life and my career. When me and my wife first got together, one of the things she had communicated to me, she's got something hereditary where we weren't supposed to be able to have kids. And at like 16, she had part of her cervix removed. Happened with her mom, happened with her grandmother, happened with her grandmother, before that. And we talked about how much traveling I was doing, even though I was making really good money at a young age doing that job for UFIT. I actually had transferred into LA Fitness because I was supposed to work less,
Mm.
got paid more. Didn't work out that way. Like slave drivers there. It's crazy. And then 2 days later, we found out that we had Grayson on the way
Wow.
after I quit. So it's a terrible time to quit a job.
Yeah.
Really put a fire under my, can we curse?
Yeah.
Let it go? No? We allowed to do that? Check. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. It did put fire under my ass. And I was
Yeah.
worried, man. I'm like, what am I supposed to do? I just gave up all this money that I was making. Now I'm responsible for another human being. And obviously my wife. It's a little bit different when you got somebody else in the mix. You got to
Yeah.
start taking things way more serious.
Absolutely.
So, that's kind of what kicked that into high gear. I'm like, we had this conversation. I was really confident about it. She's like, if you can sell all this for somebody else and take a very small percentage, there's no reason why we can't create our own thing.
Right.
And then you take the majority. And long behold, I found out being an entrepreneur, that's actually not how it works. You pay people a lot more money.
Especially at the beginning. You're like, I'm taking nothing home right now.
Exactly.
Gotta give it to everybody else first.
Irony, right?
Yeah. Everyone eats first, and especially when you're getting started.
Oh, yeah.
Well, so you started into entrepreneurship. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced? And if someone else is looking at you and like, hey, like, give me some tips on what I'm going to face as a business owner. What are they going to hit up against?
I think there's 3 fundamental things that you got to pay attention to if you want to scale a business that hold the majority of people up. And the number one thing is just your focus on your outputs and then being able to keep vision on the board.
Mm.
Like it goes one of 2 ways. Like people promise the world,
Yeah.
but they can't actually afford to give the world because they don't have the infrastructure for it. And then people dump all the money into the infrastructure, and now they don't have enough money to either market it, or they're paying way too much for their overhead and they have to sell too much to cover the overhead,
Mm-hmm.
but then you're not taking any money home. So there has to be a good divide between how much money you're actually putting into infrastructure and quote unquote, like having bodies in the building. You have the people, it doesn't mean that you've actually hired the right people.
Yeah.
Now we're talking about like intelligence to really provide the thing that you're even selling and putting out, because you can't be everywhere at once.
Yeah.
But now I'm going to move to the second part, which is the leadership aspect. I think that people, when they start hiring people and they're paying out XYZ dollars and it costs thousands of dollars to just keep the business open on a month-to-month basis, I think you start to give yourself alleviance and you take a couple steps back. You've hired people to do certain things and you should be able to trust them to do them. But the same thing goes to stand. No one's going to care about your business more than you do. So you should oversee and handhold people through certain things, at least quarterly, to see what's going on and ask questions to see why they're doing it so you can understand it, because you might not agree with it.
Right.
And as soon as you start stepping back from that and you start shying away from it, you want to be like an owner and not be in the business anymore. It's not really such a thing as doing that. Because as soon as something catches on fire, you get a phone call, you got to show up.
Yep.
You could prevent that fire. You don't have to show up if you would just do the things and take the course of action that you need to step into.
Right. Yeah, trust but verify. I feel like when I've passed off things, I'm like, yeah, it's going well. Then I'm like, let me go just double check really quick to make sure this is getting done to my standards. And you're like, I think we need to tweak this. So I can go back and now I can coach. But if you just sort of let it go, you don't know what's going to happen. It's going to drift, right? I think that's really important. Struggle with that, right? Like you said, hey, we're spending money over here. Like, oh, well, now we overcorrected. We got some money over here. You're like, you're playing a little bit of a shell game. Yeah, I totally get that. So explain now where you ventured. So that first venture into entrepreneurship, what was that?
First venture into entrepreneurship was my move was knowing more of like a blue collar lifestyle. Like my dad was one of 6 brothers, very first business owner, like in the entire family. But he was one of the people that also got stuck working in the business, like actually in the field. He pours concrete, lays block, does really well. Never really wanted me to join into business. But ironically, Sarasota was one of the fastest growing cities in the entire US at the time when we moved back from the East Coast of Florida to the West Coast of Florida. So you read any entrepreneur book, you're supposed to solve problems. Nobody wanted to finish concrete or do any staining. No one wanted to do any grinding. So that's the business that I started. I'd fix a solution to where all these developments are going up, and then I'd just do the finish work.
Nice.
And that took a turn for the worst, because if anybody gets involved in business and you want to get any kind of credit or anything that's allotted to you to take a loan out or anything to really start, you need 2 years of business history. You know this.
Yep.
The issue with that is we didn't have it, and me and Kaylee had roughly 36 grand set aside. That was supposed to go down for a deposit in the house, which ultimately did not go down for a deposit in the house. It cost me $24,000 to get this grinder. And at that point in time, I needed it because in Boca Grande, which isn't too far from here, we got a whole development that was going up. Called my uncle. I'm like, hey, dude, quit your job. You're coming to work for me. I got this whole thing figured out. It was great. Went and bought this F-150. It was like an OBS truck, the old metal ones. Yep. It was a 94.
All right.
And I was pulling this $24,000 grinder with this $1,200 truck. And it was the most ridiculous thing, the most ridiculous thing in the world. Big smile on my face. And we had got it on Wednesday, and I'm sorry, we had booked that on Wednesday, picked the grinder up on Friday, and drove to work that Monday morning, and the contractor got fired. I lost all the jobs,
Oh,
and I couldn't return the grinder. It was one of those things where I didn't know like what I was going to do. Like at
right.
this point in time, I'm like, I'm screwed. I don't know how I'm supposed to go have this conversation with my pregnant wife to be. And so like any other, confident gym rat, I took a couple scoops of pre-workout instead of going home. And that's when it dawned on me too. It was like a new hack. Like Monday at 11:30 a.m., obviously people working a 9 to 5 aren't at the gym. The people that can be there are there. And that's how I met this gentleman named Tommy Rodriguez. It was that day that everything was falling apart. And he goes, approaching me. Mind you, I just told you I came out of the fitness industry. So I looked the
Yeah,
part, right?
sure.
Kept asking me questions. And I'm trying to clear my mind. So the last thing I want to do is talk to somebody. Not trying to be rude,
Yeah.
but this notification keeps going off on his phone. Boom, boom, boom. I'm like, dude, you should really get that. Right. I'm trying to do my own thing. He pulls out his phone. He goes, oh, no. He goes, this is just what I do for a living. And he shows me like this Amazon seller notification. He goes, every time this has gone off, I've made money. Now, me and Kaylee had dabbled with eBay in the past, but it was like nothing like what he was showing me on the phone. And he goes, if you're interested on the weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I do 3-day, it's like a live course. It's very hands-on, but it's $10,000. I'm like, fuck. So instead of,
Do you want to buy a grinder off me
right.
instead? I'll trade you.
I'm like, I don't know. This seems wildly risky. That the only thing is like, I have had a past with e-commerce and online sales. Just again, it was nothing to this volume. So if you could show
Yeah.
me how to do that, I'll pivot out of this so I don't have to do this ever again. And this is something I could work at, at home with my wife. And before I had the chance to have the conversation with her, I did spend the $10,000. Yeah, that happened, man.
You're just like, all right, I gotta make this
Yeah,
work.
I'm like, you know what? Fuck it, I'm in.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be a really great thing. I learned a lot of development things, but it's also the same thing that we just talked about, leadership and growth. Just because I took a course doesn't mean that there wasn't more to learn.
Sure.
I went through my own mistakes. I lost money, had money tied up, but it overall ended up being like a really profitable venture. Like the very first 12 months of us doing it at home, I made a little over 112 grand, which is great for a first year in business.
Sure.
And that's not, talking about the losses that still got tied up. Like anybody else, you get money tied up. Sometimes people quit.
Sure.
It's the matter, I guess, of just like staying consistent. You're consistent enough, you figure stuff out. And then it's application of figuring that things out in order to course correct so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah. What would you say is the sort of pivotal moment in your sort of business journey that you feel has really propelled you forward to where you are today?
I'd say time, and the importance of time. One of the hardest moments that me and Kaylee went through, my son got delivered 4 or 5 weeks early, and he had to get like a special type of medication in Port Charlotte Hospital, which by the way got closed down like 6 months after he got delivered for this very same thing I'm about to tell you about. Um, but we were in the hospital for like 3 or 4 days, and I
Mm,
was stuck in a point where I had to go back to work.
yeah.
And it was just really terrible timing because by the time I had gone to work and came back, I found out my wife was sleeping. They gave my son the wrong medicine, and he was in the NICU for 14 days.
Mm,
So I saw him and I was holding him to going back, and I had to look at him in a plastic box for the next 14 days with like 17 tubes attached to his body.
yeah. It's hard.
And I started thinking about like what I want to create, what I want to do, where I want to spend my time. How much time do you have? How much of it have I wasted now? Am I even happy with where it's being allocated? If it does, like, what a shame would it be, like, if there are things that you wanted to do and you never made the time in order to do those things.
Sure.
And that's, I think, why buying out the company that I just bought means so much because I don't think I'm the only person that thinks that way,
Yeah.
especially with another man that has kids.
Yep.
You want to be around them and you want to create things too, and you want to grow and you want to show them that you're able to do things at capacity. And, dad's like the greatest superhero to
Yeah.
walk the planet, but you also got to be around.
Yeah.
So,
That's the toughest. I just, I spent a lot of time in the business and feeling like I gotta, keep doing this so I can create the world you want to create for them. And you're
mhm,
like, but then you're also not present as much, right? I feel what I try to be as intentional as present when I am there, right? But when I'm not the time, right?
yeah.
Finite capacity.
You did say a really interesting word there that's in there, and I think that that's what makes all the difference, and that's intentional.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people, a lot of dads that spend more time with their kids than I do, but I would argue that it's not as intentional. They're not even involved. Like you sitting on a couch with your hand in a bag of Lay's and watching TV just because you're home doesn't mean you spend time with your kids.
Sure.
When I'm home, my phone stays in my truck. I'm there for 2 hours. It's balls to the wall. There's body slams and power bombs and choke slams and whatever on the couches.
Right.
Fully involved into bass, into book reading. When they got dad, they got dad.
Yeah.
It might not be as much time as I want it to be, but I am also waiting for the age for them to grow up to where they can come visit me, at work. I want them to work with me.
Sure.
That's why I renamed the company after the kids,
I love it.
which was pretty cool because we did do a media run, me and the media guys that are here. Um, and I don't want to say I snuck Grayson into the event, but more or less I convinced them my 7-year-old was a 13-year-old. And he walked the showroom pet floor with us this past expo.
Oh, nice.
And he signed us a deal. So
Good for him.
yeah.
So tell me about that. So you acquired a company. Tell me about that process. What was that like for you? What were some of someone's out there looking to buy a business? Like, what are some of the concerns
Oof.
or making an acquisition? What lessons learned? And then also now that you're in this business, talk to me about that.
It was very it was eye-opening. I have ran several profitable businesses. I never quite made and I don't want to, quote crazy figures. I did have a business partnership and we pushed close to doing 10 million in a year, and that's revenue. I'm not claiming to be like this,
Sure.
multi-billionaire, multiple Ferraris, Wes Watson in my driveway. By any means, but we did very well. So it's not like me
Sure.
dancing around the business space. I was dumb coming into it by any means, but there were so many moving parts, and depending on how big the business is that you're buying, I'd say pay attention to the pieces and who was moving those pieces. I was close friends with somebody that owned the company, but he wasn't necessarily running it.
Got it.
Somebody else was. And it led to a lot of crazy things that a lot of people do not know, like her fleeing the country.
Mm.
And that was wild. Being pushed into this with the timeline that I had, if someone's pressuring you into a timeline, and again, it's not even necessarily the person that owned the company, I would just say walk away from the deal.
Yeah.
If you don't have the time to do your due diligence and nitpick through everything, maybe don't do it.
Right. Spend your time.
Correct.
Yeah. Dig in. 100%. So talk to me about the business now you're running and what it means and what it is. I know it's wholesale management,
Yeah.
but talk to me about what that means and what are some of the nuances of growing a business like that. And
I mean, it's a big opportunity cost to walk away from it, to not get things moving right. Like if you look at the end of the road, which, we're nowhere near the end of the road, but 2 years later, I can say it's finally running the way that I always envisioned it to run.
Mm.
And there's going to be other improvements too as we grow and as we scale. But you're looking at like this small economy inside this space to where, it's not, there's no versatility like there is in any other market. There's been zero retractions in the last 25 years, specifically in this space. There's $467 billion accrued just last year, and 61% of it was third-party sellers.
Mm.
It's way too large not to capitalize, in that market, especially when it doesn't seem like there's any potential risk.
Sure.
I mean, you go through what we just did with like this pandemic, and we thought that because people were losing their jobs, they weren't going to be able to buy. And then now all of a sudden we're looking double, triple sales. And I'm like, I don't know where you're getting the money to spend it, but you're spending it. I'm glad I'm in this market, not in the market.
A lot of money got spent for sure.
Yeah, it's the way it goes. And I look at it this way now too. Like the money's always going to be spent and you're always going to spend the money. It's just now it makes the difference if you hold the products and you're going to profit off of it as well.
Right.
If you do it, someone else is going to do it.
Yeah. So what are some of the challenges you've seen as you've been growing the company? I mean, culturally, I ask this question a lot because I feel like the culture makes a difference with a company.
It does.
What has been some of your philosophies around growing a company with a company culture
I mean,
as you expand?
a few different things. Culture building's huge. I think a lot of people don't understand what that means or what it means to even have culture inside a company. Sometimes that doesn't mean just giving like quarterly bonuses or like a holiday bonus. It's actually instilling a vision in a working leadership team so they understand the vision that you have.
Mhm.
But it's also showing up like every Monday meeting and not making excuses to not be there, regardless of how crazy your schedule looks. Like if you're the guy that's steering the car, you got to show up to do those things, especially to kick off a week.
Yeah.
And if there's big prominent problems, I don't want them in somebody else's hands, at least not now and not for the time being.
Yeah.
And I would argue that you probably shouldn't up until you reach the point of like what maybe nine figures tastes like. I don't know yet. We'll get there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I would imagine that you have a pretty solid foundation at that point in time.
Yeah.
Um, but don't plan on ever having to step away from that and not being able to build that and show up for those people.
Yeah. I believe you gotta be there and gotta be able to have done most of the jobs that you're asking people to do, or at least just to some capacity, your best
Yeah,
ability to do it.
yeah.
So that you know what it takes to do that. You're like, "Hey, listen, I've done it." Like, if you don't wanna do it, that's fine, but
That's it. That's it, man.
go somewhere else.
We even did something that's like outside of business just to see like personal growth. Like it's
Yeah.
important to understand like personal goals. So I asked everybody, give me 3 personal goals that you would want to see like with achieved within like the next 365 days. And we ran our own version of 75 hard. We did a 90-day cleanse, no
Nice.
alcohol, no whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
There was, a couple exercises throughout the day, gallon of water, the reading, but then I did something called CBT, it's really big for course correcting. And the more that you understand CBT, it's easier to understand yourself and lead other people and also sell more products. It's called cognitive behavior therapy.
Mm.
And this first started when I was studying like how people were coming out of like severe PTSD and anxiety
Mm.
without medication. And it was proven to be more effective than medication.
Wow.
So if you can dive into your own psyche and understand like how that works, you can understand how other people work and operate. You got to self-identify it first.
Yeah.
So we did that, and I got them all a copy of the book, and it was a really good run. But for us to all do that and share it together, that's building culture in a company because now it shows that you actually care about the people that are working for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Investing in their development and their betterment. I found that is you're gonna get the reward of that just because they become better in general.
Hmm.
But I mean, just the relationship building component. To your point, like there's no one that's gonna care as much as the owner. But when people know you care, they sort of tend to grab on to the
Yeah,
vision a little bit tighter and can see what their role is in the vision. I've always been very clear about that, so people understand, like, here is where you are, but here is how you are helping us get to this, and this is your true impact to the end user.
yeah,
Otherwise, people are just like, I'm going about my day, just like hacking away at something, and they don't really get it, you know. And you're
yeah,
like, why aren't you working hard? You know, why do you care so much about PTO? Right? It's like
yeah. Right.
because I don't know what I'm doing here. You know, they don't even know what they're doing here, and maybe there's not the right fit for what they're trying to accomplish, which is, I think we got to get them out. You know,
And
yeah,
that was my big point too. Going back to like you want to fill the infrastructure too. You want to make sure that you get the people to take care of the promises that you're making to the
yeah,
clients that you're selling. But if you have the wrong people in there and you just have people that are kind of like standing around, they can't fulfill the vision, or they're not even capable of that kind of growth or open to it.
yeah,
You can't train everybody. Not everybody's open to learning.
yeah.
And that's the other thing, like hard thing you got to swallow is like you get this attachment to certain people and you want more for them than they want for themselves.
Yeah.
And you gotta create like this strike system to where it's like, all right, I tried this time, I tried this time, now they're out. Because if you keep going and you're up like at 7, 8 strikes, at some point in time, it's like, I should have already learned my lesson. I could have saved myself so much money, so much time, so much energy, and they still don't care.
Right.
You gotta cut it off. You gotta rip the band-aid off.
Yeah. Yeah. Slow to hire and fast to fire, as they say, right?
Yes, sir.
Absolutely. What's an unpopular opinion that you have about business that a lot of people don't agree with?
That's a really good question. Um, it's kind of funny. One of my media guys actually asked me this, and I think it's especially in the sales world. Everybody thinks that every no could be a yes, and I don't think that that's necessarily true. I don't
Mm,
think that every client's the right fit.
mm.
There's been so many people that I've taken their money, and I'd be so much happier to pay them double just to go away.
Yeah.
And that's just the fact of the
Yeah.
matter. Like you
Yeah.
need money to scale and especially get off the ground.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna tell you right now, like all the sun, moon, and stars that you're promising to one specific person just because you need the upfront money is such a headache later down the road. It's
Yeah.
not because you can't offer those things, but you're giving like deals and discounts and whatever you can to get them in
Sure.
just to make sure like the business can thrive and do what it needs and gets where it needs to be.
Right.
You just at some point in time you got to cut that off.
Yeah.
Can't keep doing things like that. It'll drive everybody insane.
100%.
Literally fucking mad. Like start going crazy.
I've done tech sales and sometimes it was a square peg round hole. I was very good at doing that. I was very good at helping people understand what they thought this could do for them, but not everything was a fit. And at the end of the day, there were some no's where I'm like, I probably should have just let you say no
Yeah.
and left it at that, because then you're like, after you're like, yeah, this not great. And now I've transitioned out of a place where I have to do that into a place where that's not even the case at all. Like every solution is custom, so there's never going to be that case. But
Yeah.
still get no's. But in that situation, if you're in sell, I'm just gonna make close the deal, and you're like, okay, this was probably not a good fit.
Right.
I think that's sort of the difference between having a long term game plan versus just like hacking through a short term. Hey, I just got to get this to work right now,
Bingo.
and I have a vision for 10 years. I have a shorter goal for 3. I have a goal for 1. I have a quarterly goal. Now I know, hey, listen, yes, not every person's gonna be a good fit because I do want this to be a long term
Yeah.
relationship that's gonna be profitable over time and
That's
not
it,
more of
man.
a headache.
So that's the difference in thinking in a year and thinking in 10 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What's been the most important success for you over the last few years as you've been growing your company?
I finally feel like I have the right team. And why I say that that's a success is the trajectory that I'm trying to be on for that 10-year goal that we just talked about.
Mm,
I can see that the pieces that I currently have don't look like they need to change anytime soon.
yeah,
And when I say anytime soon, I mean by that 10-year mark.
that's great.
And at that point in time, I would think that there'd be so much growth, through every individual that's in those moving pieces, those leadership positions, that we're going to run into problems. We always will,
Yeah,
but it's the least amount of resistance.
sure.
That feels great to know.
Yeah. What is and to you with your team, right? You talked about, charismatic people, you've talked about and people bought into the vision. What do you feel like the decision criteria is when you bring someone in? Let's say someone's trying to beat down your door and be like, hey, I want to work for you right now.
Yeah.
What are you gonna like? What are you gonna run them through? What filter are you running them through to determine like, should I even decide if you should be part of this?
Well, it's actually the polar opposite of why people sometimes hate this space or they hate like we'll call them any kind of like online entrepreneur or which we're not course sellers, but
Sure.
it's a thing in the space. It's a buzz thing. It's a get rich quick thing. And anybody that's looking to make money really, really fast, that's not my ideal client.
Right.
I'm growing a business. And like we have just now discussed, anytime that you grow a business, it takes time and it takes patience. So if you want me to do it right, you want my team to do it right, you actually want an end goal with this thing, that cannot be like your main priority.
Yeah.
We're not doing this in 60 days. It's not
Yeah.
going to happen that way.
Someone comes in and like, I need to make cash. I hear you're good at wholesale management,
Yeah.
and you're like, cool, but this is gonna be a long term burn. This is a business we're building. This isn't just like we're gonna be rich tomorrow.
Right.
They have to be able to like expand their mind to wrap their head around that.
Right. And it's everything is it's twofold, right?
Yeah,
Any other traditional franchise that you buy into, you don't even break a dollar profit until what, 2 years?
sure.
24 months has passed. I think it's like 24 to 30 months average.
Yeah,
So two and a half
a lot of
years.
businesses don't for 3 years.
We offer a money back guarantee within 2 years. So when I say long term, 2 years to a lot of people is still too long,
Sure.
which to me is crazy.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
It's like if that was the expectation, then why don't you just do it yourself?
yeah,
If you
yeah.
could do it faster, do it faster.
Right,
If not, don't put that on me and the team.
right. When you have a structure in place.
Yeah.
Who have you turned to for advice in the past? Any like mentors or people, or even just like people in the media or podcast or like that?
One of the most impactful mentors that I had, he's pretty local. Actually, he's in Tampa. His name's Myron Golden, and he's been a really good friend and a good mentor for a long time. He helped me get back into religion and fixing my relationship with God. But at the same time, he's a guy that taught me how to, sell $1 million worth of products from in a 20-minute speech from a stage, which I've now done twice, which is crazy. It just changes your philosophy and how you view money and what expectations are.
Yeah.
And he's done it repeatedly. I think his markers now is like over 100 people he's taught how to do it.
Mm,
So to think like you have a knowledge base like that and you can apply it to so many other people, you can't deny it.
yeah.
Something has to work at that point.
So his ability that he transferred to you is communication to a large group of people. Is that
In a way, and it's
yeah.
business principles too.
Yeah.
Everything that he does, every principle that he teaches, business principle, leadership principle, speaking principle, all comes from the Bible.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah.
What would you say is let's say if you were to go back and you found your younger self, I don't know, 10, 20 years ago, would be something that you would tell yourself, yeah, the opportunity.
I probably won't say that on this podcast, but I I don't know that I'd actually change anything. I think that there could have been less risks that I would have taken to make sure that I made it to this point,
Mm.
which is good. Like a lot of us had our fair share of a crazy past.
Sure.
Um, but like anything else, experiences shape the person.
Yeah.
And we just talked about learning lessons. So I don't know that I would be where I am if I'd technically changed anything.
Yeah.
I maybe give myself a pointer that, which I still do it. And my wife's been trying to drill the same thing in my head for the last 12 years, but it's to not set expectations on people.
Mm.
It's one of the hardest lessons you'll ever learn. And you're going to keep learning it if you're that kind of person. But you get less of a tolerance for it. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's been tough for me. I had very low EQ. Well, I got decent EQ. I had very low empathy
mm,
early in my career
mm,
because I was just a decent sales guy. So I did well, crushed it. I'm like, well, if you're gonna be around me, you should be doing the same thing too. And then they're like, you should be a manager. You should lead these team of people. And you're like, well, okay. And then everyone who's not doing it, you're like, why aren't you working harder? Then why you give me this excuse? And it was very tough to really then be like, okay, I gotta like really connect with these people for them to actually want to listen to any advice I have,
yeah,
regardless that hey, Michael just cares about himself because his team's quota is X, right?
right.
And sitting there like, well, I guess should I fire these people? I can't do that. So got to figure out a way to make it work. And fixing my empathy helped a lot to be like,
Changed
all right,
everything.
let's have a mutual discussion about this and come to terms on what we need to do to be successful. And man, it's tough. Like I just had these expectations of people that, hey, do what I do. Why? Just it's not that hard.
Right,
Just be the number one person. It's not that bad.
right.
And then they weren't unable to accommodate, right? So that changed completely the dynamic of how leadership came to me. Um, and there are a few people that really hammered that into me to like beat me over the head and be like, dude, you're just an asshole. like, like it worked when you were an individual contributor. It does not work if you want to ever lead people. You want people to follow you. And so I can appreciate what you're saying about that.
Yeah,
It took me a
man.
little while to, but I still have high expectations. And I look at people that it's tough. I look at people that I sort of model after. I'm like impressed by people like Elon Musk and Andy Frisella and Milet and these guys, right? That have built these massive organizations, have lots of people that follow them,
Right.
and they don't believe in doing things half-assed, right? So, like, how do you? But you want to build a culture on people that want to be like magnetized to you for that same culture,
Yes.
but also bought in on their own, right? So you're
Right.
not just like do this, right? So
Right.
yeah,
That is the idea, and I mean that's the core to leadership
yeah,
is having somebody that wants to be a part of your vision. You have to have such a strong drive and message that people want to be a part of whatever that thing is, and
yeah,
that's really what we've been doing here at Greywolf. And I do think that at some point in time, there's going to have to be a cutoff for and limitations based off of what we can do. But I also think that will be one of the best opportunities that you can put your money in the market.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have Greywolfe, which is your entity to help bring partners in to be part of your wholesale management company. And then is there
Yeah.
another entity as well that you function with?
Legacy Wholesale is who operates under the wholesale license.
Cool.
Grey Wolf operates under the other license that we talked about,
Yeah. Cool.
and it's important that you diversify between the two.
Yeah.
Grey Wolf is the one that got awarded the key to the city in the city of Sarasota.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And I did see that. That was during hurricane relief efforts.
Yes.
Which hurricane was that? Which one was that?
This past one 2 years ago,
Oh wow.
when Venice and Northport,
Yeah.
we lugged a few $100,000 worth of product down there, and just making sure that people had food and water and generators, and
Wow.
even getting people out. Like my grandparents, which this story sucked, but it's also one of those reasons too, where you should have extra assets and things that you can to be accessible to take care of family members. My grandparents, my grandpa, when he moved down from Indiana, a family of 6 brothers that I just told you about, he built that house with his bare hands.
Mm.
And it was one of 3 houses in Northport. And that hurricane hit. And I'm not kidding. I couldn't make it in there, but they had the fire department, the police department on airboats getting
Yeah.
people out because it was
I
so
remember
deep.
that. Yeah.
Maybe 2 minutes later, thank God, the bottom of the house collapsed
Jeez.
and he lost his house. And everybody was supposed to show up and fly into for that Christmas.
Wow.
And that got taken away. And luckily, due to money, because you can only imagine like what insurance claims look
Wow.
like at that point in time,
Yeah.
we filed for the insurance, but we had money to work on in the meantime.
Sure.
We didn't get them back in as soon as we hoped, but at the same time, I guess that's what happens when materials are, they're scarce.
Yeah. Wow.
So
I remember I remember going all that shipping supplies down. We sent a lot of stuff down from our gym. Actually, we collected a huge amount, and then our friends took down a massive moving truck down there and dumped stuff off.
that's good.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, again, this year with the flooding, it's just you never know what to expect. You got to prepare for the worst sometimes, and
Right.
just be ready.
I mean, look at Sarasota. We only had a category 1 this time, and airport was 18 inches underwater.
Yeah,
It's
wild,
crazy.
man. It really puts things in perspective because for a while we're like, we're immune, we never really get hit, but then all of a sudden you're like,
Right.
oh well, we could be underwater here by 4 feet.
Hmm.
Some houses were really just devastated. Um, Very interesting. What are some of the things that you feel as like an economy, right? That we need to focus on, right? I think as business owners, right? What do we need to think about long term when we're building a business in the current state of where we're at today?
Mm. Without getting into politics, man, that's a really tough one to put a finger
It
on.
can be controversial if you want.
Um, I prefer we stay away from that route, for the for the time being. But I think the worst thing that you can do for an economy is hold on to money, which
Yeah,
everybody's holding on to money now.
yeah,
Unless money's moving, that means money's not being spent. Nobody has a livelihood anymore.
yeah,
So make things lucrative, make things accessible for other people. I would also say that make sure that there's some kind of value that's attached to whatever it is that you're giving away, because what creates it isn't just the state of the economy, but it's the waste of money when people start self-identifying that they're blowing it.
yeah,
So, if whatever it is that you're selling and you're contributing to the economy, make sure that there's a very solid quality of return that's going back into it, so people are more incentivized to spend.
yeah. Or perpetuity of
Yeah,
business, right? Recurring business. Um, Very cool. So you've obviously done a good job of building, your brand, and you have a book, you have a pretty significant following, right? Like, what are
yeah.
some people who are aspiring to do the same thing and build their company? Like, what are some of the things that you could share about how to do that, like authentically and do it well?
Um, that's a really good point. I would say that copy the values that are inside Steal Like an Artist. It's the best thing that you could do is take a model that works and refine it to the way that works best for you and the way that you operate and the way that you think, but apply and attach your own morals and values to the way that you do it. There's a quote that I read that I love and I'll never be able to forget. And it says, better to be low key killing it than high key faking it.
Mm,
And if I have to keep putting on like this image of this is my rented Lambo and this is my rented yacht and I'm making all of this money and I own none of these things, but now I have to continue to keep up with that. It's so draining and it might attract attention, but at the same time, you don't even believe your own message.
yeah,
And at some point in time, that energy thing that we talked about, the energy transfer that I talked about in Closer, it
sure.
comes off, man.
Yeah,
Those people don't last.
right.
You want a lasting brand, a lasting business, whatever it is that you're putting into it, figure out why you're doing it in the first place, make that the driving factor, and then distill that belief in everybody else around you.
Yeah, just stay authentic and the true
Yeah.
situation,
Wow.
right?
Be honest. Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
It's tough in social media, man. It's like everything out there. Now it's like anyone you could be an artificial intelligent robot and on there you don't even know. You're like, "This is a person?" No, it's not. It's some AI
it's,
figure. It's not even a
it's
real
very
person.
true.
I just got a request or Instagram hit me up. They're like, "Create your AI avatar and AI." I'm like, "Wait. I can create an avatar and it's gonna be what's it gonna do? Like, is it gonna take over my account? Is it gonna become me? I don't know."
Robot me.
Yeah. With that said, I mean, with artificial intelligence becoming more prevalent, I know it's been around for a good bit, maybe sort of less fluid, but with things like ChatGPT and the utilization of those in different business tools,
Right.
how have you felt the effects of that to make your life easier in any way, and any things that you've used either as a entrepreneur or within the business itself that you feel like are like you need to check these things out?
Without a doubt. I mean, it saves you a lot of money if you figure out how to use AI.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you know how to leverage it both ways, it's also going to make you a lot of money. If we look at the future and what's going to end up happening, AI is becoming so prevalent that everybody's going to have it because it's going to save so much cash
Yeah.
that now the scarce part and the thing that people are sought out to get is more of a human interaction. So as long as we can have that as a big major piece to the way that the business is rolling and operating, who
Yeah.
cares what software I'm using on the back end?
Right.
But I do think that people will take automations too far, and they will have robots in places that they don't belong.
Right.
Like, who doesn't want some kind of human interaction, especially if you're placing your money in their hands? I don't want a robot running that.
Yeah. No, there's a really good point. I feel like the place for the artificial intelligence technology is to where a task that required not a lot of intelligence can be shortened drastically by some minor intelligence, but really just quickness of the computer doing it
Yeah,
so that the person behind that job or role can spend a lot more time being intentional about their day versus spending time I have to like do this process that would just take time,
right.
right?
Well,
And
that's
really
a
commit.
very direct example. So I have a software that'll sift through a catalog once I get a contract, like a buying contract from like someone like Disney or Kellogg's or Hasbro or Purina, right? And that'll go through top 100,000 selling products.
Mm.
From that point in time, it's a manual sift to go through who is accredited to sell said products. And now me calling and talking to whoever the distribution center is or the brand manufacturer and negotiating the deal if I buy XYZ.
Mm.
That's the human side. So I'll
Yeah.
let the computer sift it down to make my job easier. But now this is where the human kicks in.
Yeah.
And it's got to go on both sides of the coin. Like both are very leverageable. I don't believe that a computer can do it all.
Right. No, I found that there's some certain things around scheduling and just data management, parsing things down, and just be able to feed it in and you'll get back something that's it's like 90%, and you go and just do your 10%
Tweaks.
tweaks, and then you go and use that
Yeah.
and have a more skillful conversation because of that, right?
Yeah.
Um, I feel like that is the use cases for it. But I've seen, and I have a few buddies that now operate in that space and they help companies sort of go from A to Z in their business, say like, hey, where can we implement pieces here that are going to be helpful from like lead to cash, right? And
Yeah.
then through sort of recurring
Yeah.
clientele, which I think is huge. But yeah, we'll see how the robots take over here. But any sort of final thoughts that you feel would be most helpful for young entrepreneurs, people looking to get into a new business venture, anything that you feel could be sort of most impactful?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna say this because I kind of feel like this part is falling apart too. Like one of the biggest things that I contribute a lot of success to is the fact that I have a very valuable relationship. Probably the most valuable thing to me is having the relationship that I have with my wife. And I think that the internet's done a really, really great job of sabotaging any potential relationships in the future. You got a lot of guys that think that they need to lead and girls that expect XYZ with money. I really think like the same way with leading a team, and this is where it goes with the business. If you're ever going to lead a woman that you want to trust, you have to prove that you're the guy willing to be able to lead her in the first place. It's the same thing if you have a team of people behind you. If you want them to believe in your vision, you have to prove that you're going to lead them. And that's
Mm,
by showing up and consistency and instilling that vision and
yeah,
showing that you're going to do everything that you say you're going to do and get it done regardless. Like it doesn't matter like if you're up for 18, 19 hours, get the damn thing done.
sure.
And unless you're ready to show up that way, I would advise you just not to start.
Yeah. I
That's the
love
final thought.
I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, brother. Thanks for coming in, sharing a bit about your business and your journey. We'll make sure we have your book
Appreciate that.
and Closer, name of the
Yes.
book,
Yes.
and a bit about you posted up in the notes so people can find you and ask you questions.
Very cool.
All right, brother.
Appreciate you, man.
Thanks.
Good to see you.